Well, Mr. Larry Zbysko joins me here today. Very much a pleasure. We're here, in the year of our Lord 2022. How is your day, sir? And how is life at the moment for Larry Zbysko, you'd say?
Well, you know what? I can't complain. Larry Land has worked out really good. I got 4 boys, but they're all grown men now. None of them need money. They're doing good, so that's good.
That's always good.
And in fact, one of them's in the Air Force, and he's he's stationed on Air Force 2. So he's been flying around with the big shots the last 4 years. And I got a new baby granddaughter, so I got 4 grandkids now, one 22 and one 4 months.
Oh, wow. 4 months, just fresh.
I know. There's Zbyskos all over the country.
Hey, that's awesome. No, we gotta keep that legendary genealogy rolling, if you will.
Yeah, you know what? Gene-wise, I've been lucky. I'm 70, but my health is great. And the skeleton's a little beat, with the surgeries on the knees and the elbow after, almost over 25 years in the ring every day. But I've been lucky. No artificial parts, don't need surgeries, feel good. So
you're still feeling good. That means you're able to get out to the links every so often then, right?
Yeah, once in a while I'll go out and play, and I get 9 holes in now. Then sometimes I stop because I don't want to do anything to hurt my knees.
Right.
I'm doing nothing to hurt myself, Brandon, because I want to, if I make it to 80, 85 and leave this dimension, which is natural, I just don't want to do it with, all kind of surgeries and all that artificial crap. I mean, my dad's 92, going on 93 soon, and he's 100% there. He's been through, a couple cancers and some heart surgeries, but he's doing great.
Tough breed.
We're Polacks. We're too dumb to die.
Well, you mentioned there, I bring up the golf thing because that's one of the major memories I have, especially of the Nitro days. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but especially if you watch back some of that stuff, I almost wonder to myself, like, is Larry just like, he's really just like above all this? Like, he would really be out there, at least at some points, just like out there, swinging a club, as especially just like some types of the, some of the stuff that would happen, in those days, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, it was interesting, especially the last 10 years of my career, doing the broadcasting, for WCW and Nitro. I only worked like, a day a week with Nitro, maybe a day and a half with a syndicated show. So I was on the golf course 3 or 4 days a week, for years, and a good golfer. So I was a scratch golfer. And then when WCW died a slow, horrible death, and me and Bobby left and Eric left, and I moved to Florida, and because I could play on the senior mini professional golf tours. So I played on some of those for a year or so. I tried some of the senior pro, pro golf qualifiers, but damn it, I was like 3 strokes not good enough. Even if I had a great day and had a 68 or a 69, you had a handful of guys that every day, 65, 64, 66. If they had a 68, they were mad.
Right.
But I was like 3 strokes not good enough to make any money at it, and then it became like traveling and work. So I said, well, that was fun. Now I'm going to retire.
Right, and just enjoy yourself while you're doing it. No pressure.
Well, no pressure. The thing with the wrestling thing is you really never retire because someone always calls you for an autograph session or a podcast. In fact, I'll plug this because I signed a 3-year deal with a television company, and they're making a show. They got like over 3,000 hours of footage so far of old stuff that nobody else owns. And it's from like the late 50s, then the DuPont Network in the 70s and 80s. So they're going to make a show called Legends of Wrestling. And they're going to leave the original commentating on the show. So they'll really have a complete night and day feel from what's on TV today. And I'm just going to do with another guy, we're just going to host a show. You know, do a hello at the beginning, something in the middle, and it wasn't that great. We'll see you next week at the end. So I got a good deal out of that, and then we'll see what happens. Supposed to start at the end of March or early April filming my stuff. They've got some shows put together now. It's going to be called The Legends of Wrestling, and it's going to some streaming thing. Everything's going to streaming now, which I have no idea. I have a flip phone.
I'm wondering.
But I think it might be on Peacock or Tubi or something they mentioned. I can't.
I know that there's a new streaming service launching. I'm just hearing about called Pro Wrestling TV. I'm not sure if that's that's affiliated with that.
It could be. I'm not really positive where it's going yet, but they're making more action figures and some merchandise, and I get a percent of advertising. So we'll see what happens, but. So it's something to do because I don't want to do a lot, but you don't want to just sit here and be bored to death and feel like nothing. So meeting the fans and doing something makes me feel good. And wrestling fans, God bless them, they're the greatest fans of all. You know, I do a little autograph thing once in a while, and it's great to be loved.
You know, that's the thing, being a fan, you know, myself for years, I feel that, and I appreciate hearing that, you know, from you about fans, because we really do feel like sort of our own little, community, and it's just kind of one of those things. And this project sounds super exciting. I mean, the footage and everything, something that actually Vince doesn't own, that you guys can actually showcase and do something with. Sounds absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and you know what? The fans are really going to freak out, I think, because today, I mean, the WWE's become a great company. You know, I mean, it's a great company, charities and the way they take care of the guys. And the guys do a lot of high-risk, dangerous stuff because they're under contract. So if they get hurt, the company pays for the surgery. If they get rehab, they're getting money every week. But in the old days, if you got hurt, you're out of business. You know, no one's giving you money. No one's paying for your surgery.
Right. You have no guarantee.
Yeah, and in terms of production, all there was in the old days was a ring with one big light bulb hanging above the ring and half the audience smoking.
Right.
Yeah, so it's completely night and day, you know.
Literally smoking mirrors, right? I mean, I don't know if that's where it comes from, you know.
No, smoking cigarettes.
Smoking cigarettes, yeah. Now, before we get too into stuff here, I breezed by the golf, and I had something written down here that I wanted to throw out there. One more thing about the golf. Now, I'm sure you shared the links with all kinds, you know, of different characters over the years, you know, drug people out with you. Who can you call out? Who was good? Who was bad? I mean, you know, just like kind of from the wrestling business in general.
Well, you know what? I never really played with too many wrestlers because they sucked. Right. And when I was starting to do the broadcast and had all the time, I mean, one of the golf pros at the club was a friend and a fan, so I always golf for free in certain places. And once in a while, I mean, I played a couple games. I think Sting played, you know, a couple games and tried it. The funny guy was Lex Luger. And these guys were, you know, so into, you know, weight training and muscles, you know, for their generation. They weren't exactly super loose, smooth golfers. And the thing about Lex Luger that cracked me up was, you know, he'd come out, we'd play 18 holes, and Lex would suck. And then next week we'd go out and play again, and me and this guy would show up, and then Sting and Lex would show up. But Lex, every time Lex showed up, he had a different set of golf clubs. Because Lex figured it couldn't possibly be him.
It was the clubs. It
had to be the clubs. Yeah, it was a cartoon.
Wow, that's an awesome story. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I was just kind of thinking, you know, there would be something like that, you know, maybe some little bit of competition out there from some of you guys. So I had to throw that out there.
But there was no competition from the wrestlers, but, you know, I played with some, you know, golf pros and guys who worked at the golf course that were golf pros and teachers.
I just always, I guess, envisioned you and Shivani out there, you yelling at him, telling him to do so. You know what I mean? That's just kind of.
Yeah, no, Tony wasn't a golfer, and JR wasn't a golfer. And I really, I mean, back in those days when I started doing the broadcasting, my generation who were already, God, what the hell were they? Early 40s, they were either burnt out or hurt or disappeared. So when I did the broadcasting, I really didn't know the new generation of guys, the Eddie Guerreros, and they brought Ray in, and, Sting, and, I can go on, Chris Benoit, oh my God.
Right.
So I really never hung out with the guys. I did the broadcasting and then left, and then during Nitro, I did the first half of the show. And then Bobby would come out. I'd run out the back door and go to the nearest casino, or if they didn't have a casino, I'd go back to the room and beat the crowd. So I never really hung out with the young generation of guys.
It was a different little era back then for sure, and that had to have been interesting just seeing, when you came in and how there was I think probably more of a focus on technicality, and then when you're coming up through that time, the focus kind of shifted to the body thing. Everyone was into the bodies there, like in the 80s, and then you get to witness kind of from afar how it switches into more of the flying stuff and all that.
It kind of went through some stages. I mean, in fact, me and Bruno at Shea Stadium, if you look over history, that was a huge unimaginable event for those days, before national cable and pay-per-view. But that kind of marks the end of the old school era. A year or so after that, nationwide cable came and the territories died out. But the wrestlers, like you said, you were getting more and more into the surrealistic bodies. Billy Graham, the Hulk. Everybody was, all beefed up. And that's because the world was changing. Hollywood had, the Terminator and Dave Draper, and,
Right.
Everybody looked surrealistic. And, of course, we all know they cheated, and half of them are dead now. And the other half can't walk, and that's too bad. But, it changed into the body, and they were getting contracts. But the psychology was becoming a lost art. I mean, every Lex Luger match was 3 clotheslines and a power rack, torture rack, whatever it was. And then clotheslines, we're still watching them today. Clotheslines, every match, it's a clothesline. But today's athlete has now changed really from the body. Most of the guys are small, 210, 200, 190. I mean, half the talent on TV never would have gotten in the business when I started. They're just too small.
Yeah, that's the reality of it.
Yeah, but the other reality is, I mean, they're amazing athletes. And they're really doing amazing, stunts, things which are also dangerous. I mean, they're up on the top rope doing flips, landing through metal, steel ladders, and it's insanity.
Right.
I mean, I'm surprised more of them aren't hurt. They're really, amazing athletes doing amazing things with a huge production. But the only thing missing is the psychology and that emotional connection. I mean, I watch a match. I don't know who the good guy and the bad guy is. The
That's
bad
one
guy
of the
ain't
big
cheating.
issues. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the bad guys are hitting great moves, and the good guys are running across the ring from corner to corner into the bad guy's split, so they look like a complete idiot. And none of they don't know how to make themselves mean anything. It's too bad because the production's awesome.
Absolutely. If we could just go back to a little bit more of the storytelling and that sort of a thing right there, and the psychology, some of those bits and pieces that have been lost. You see it shine through every now and then. But yeah, a lot of today's stuff is like that. For sure.
Yeah, and then they do these skits and guys walking down the hallway talking. There just happens to be a secret camera crew in your motel room, but you don't know it,
Right.
I mean, it just gets a little too hard. Because people, it's a different audience than today. than we had in my day when they wanted to kill me. But they still want to believe. They want to pretend. If it's easy to pretend, and they can get into it, like going to Jurassic Park. You don't want to know what happens at the end when you go there. You want to enjoy the movie.
Well, that's the other part of the thing, too. The taking back of the curtain is one thing, like Vince saying what he did, back in the day. But now you have these guys. I mean, and what do you think of that? Like, guys are out there, they're sharing pictures with each other when they're supposed to be feuding. I mean, that sort of stuff just should not happen, right? I mean...
Well, yeah. I mean, they should keep the audience, in suspense. So the fans have fun when they don't know what's going on, because then they can, watch it and be surprised and be swerved and go, "Oh God, you asshole!"
Right.
So yeah, these guys just don't get it. And the other thing that makes me pull my hair out is some of these guys that really don't know crap. They're making $1 million a year or more. Some of them, So, yeah. I mean, again, it's a hell of a... WWE is a great company, and there's, some guys making a lot of money, and the fans love it. They're really doing dangerous things, but they could make it a lot more meaningful and more like a sport, Every match, someone just walks out from the back, walks up to the ring, stands there, and then the guy stares at him like an idiot for 10 seconds and then gets schoolboyed. It's just so stupid,
Yeah, there are some definite laps and things that you see like that in nowadays. We want to see it return. Now, you bring up WWE. We'll kind of go here now, and I want to bring this up, and I mean this with the utmost respect, but the Hall of Fame speech, your Hall of Fame induction, I mean, what happened? Because I watched it back the other night.
Oh, my God.
You probably just thought you would never be in that position, huh?
You know what? I really didn't write anything down. I just had a rough idea of what I wanted to say. And I went out there and I started it. And after a few minutes or a couple minutes or so, I looked down, and instead of being fans sitting in the front rows, they were all the wrestlers and all the guys I grew up with, Dusty Rhodes and Mean Gene and this guy and that guy. And I looked at him, and I lost my train of thought for a second. And I said to myself, what the hell did I just say? And this is interesting because I blanked out for I don't know how long. And then all of a sudden, a bolt of energy, like the fans, hit me. And I started talking, and I really didn't remember what in the hell I said after the minute of silence or whatever it was. I didn't know what I said. It came from the heart. It came from a higher dimension. And it was interesting because I walked off the stage brain dead. I was embarrassed. I thought, I'm going to kill myself. And Vince came out of the gorilla position and said, Larry, that was great. You were in the moment. That's what I wanted. Which means Vince knows I went off and it came from a higher dimension and from, a true love of the business and the fans. And yeah, I mean, it was even Arnold Schwarzenegger said, you're the greatest actor I've ever seen. That dramatic pause.
Oh, wow.
Dramatic pause. I just blanked out. And then some other guy in a three-piece suit later said, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm on the board of directors. That was the greatest speech I ever heard, and I didn't remember what I said.
Wow. No, that's just amazing. No, I could see there where you didn't have the notes, and I thought that's, a little unconventional, but he's just, he's ready to go out there and speak, from his heart. And I just couldn't imagine how just surreal that moment must have been. Like you said, you go out, you look out, you see Dusty, you see, everybody, and it's just like, wow, Yeah,
it threw me off guard, and I went blanking. But the whole thing, I tried to get across how life is really, we're all divine beings. And if you make your dream come true in this world, and when Bruno inducted me, it was kind of like the official end of a dream come true of wanting to be my hero, and then the biggest feud ever. and then the biggest career and a happy ending with saving the New World Order. Saving Nitro from the New World Order and putting all that together. So it was kind of the perfect ending to a dream come true, and I wanted to get that across to the fans that I hope all their dreams come true too, because that's why we're here temporarily on this beautiful living planet.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Bruno. Of course, we could do a whole thing on just you and Bruno alone, obviously. But I mean, how does that phone call go? Are you the one that reaches out to him to do the induction, or is that how does that come about?
Well, I mean, when they asked me to be, I was the one that got Bruno in the Hall of Fame a couple years before that.
Oh, wow.
Because Bruno didn't want to go in, some years ago, and he said, I'm never going in. He's doing his thing. Yeah. So then Bruno felt like a hypocrite. If I go in, people think I'm a hypocrite. I said, no one's going to think you're a hypocrite, Bruno. I love you. The Garden is a perfect spot. And McMahon and Triple H came to me and asked me if I would talk Bruno into doing it.
Oh, wow.
And I said, hey, I'll give him my best because I believe you. He should be, So I talked to him, took me a couple months, and then fixed him up with Triple H and Vince, and then they had a great, coming together. Because Bruno realized, too, after talking to people, that the WWE became a great company, and they put their foot down to the stuff that he was bitching about 20 years before with the steroid abuse and all that crap,
Oh, yeah.
But then, they put their foot down to that. They drug tested. They, if someone needed rehab, they'd put them through rehab 10 times if they were that, goofy. But they took care of people. And Bruno saw it was a great company, so he was happy to go in. And then he did the WrestleManias and then inducted me, and they asked me to go in. I said, well, I got to ask Bruno. I'm sure he'll do it, but he was already getting close to 80, but still in good health. Skeleton was shot.
Yeah, which just happens. You hit that hard mat, hit the outside, hit everywhere. Over the years, and
over the years, and then you get 70, 75. Then arthritis comes in, and the natural decaying of your body. So that doesn't help.
No, but just what a cool moment, and just just the amazingness of that in of itself. I mean, of course, like you've mentioned and well established. I mean, Bruno being your hero, and that's how you got into the business. Essentially, was under him. When you're first coming in to wrestling, is there sort of I don't know what to say. Maybe like a little bit of a stigma that you're Bruno's guy? Did anyone ever hassle you because of that, or did you just feel protected more than anything? I would imagine.
No, well, you know what? I mean, I was 21, a young dumb Polak. It was the day of Polak jokes, that era.
Yeah.
But I was just so happy to be there, and I didn't realize it at the time. I caught on maybe a year or so later But at the time, I was just happy to be there. But back in those days, the wrestlers didn't want anybody in the wrestling business because it would take their spot, or they could go to another territory when they got burnt out in one. So they didn't want new people in the business. There was no wrestling schools and indies and none of that crap. So... But then I realized all of a sudden a year later, guys like Monsoon and Chief J. Strongbow and Skolin and even Vince Sr. and Jr. and, Albano and the guys that have been there a while, the pros, they all were very nice to me. And I worked out with a couple guys from Wigan that taught me how to break arms and necks and wrists, all the old hooker stuff. And they did it because if they were nice to me, they thought they were getting brownie points with Bruno.
There you go.
So I had politics on my side, right. But I didn't realize it at the time when I was 21. I was just thankful to be there, Everybody was nice to me.
All right, so nothing bad then. If anything, you reap the benefits of being associated with such a guy as Bruno at the time. I see.
Yeah. I mean, it was a benefit, but which I didn't realize at the time. But yeah, they were nice to me in that where other people they wouldn't even want in the business, because it in those days there was no contracts. If you didn't sell tickets, you didn't eat. It was a different tough survival,
So does Bruno does he introduce you to Vince Senior, or does he just kind of bring you with him one day? How does that all?
I was wrestling around Pittsburgh a little bit because Bruno kind of owned that part of the territory, Pittsburgh and the little towns. And then Bruno just called Vince Senior up one day and said, "Hey, I got this kid. I've been training work. Out looks good. I want to bring him in and as my protege." And that's then Vince Senior, said sure, because it was Bruno. Bruno was the money-making machine of the WWF in those days. So if Bruno wanted some, Vince Senior said, "Sure, great."
Right. Where do I sign?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what's your initial, are you around him much? I mean, what's the initial meeting with him like, if you can remember at all? Or Vince Senior, like the first time you met him?
Oh, you know what? God, I really don't remember the first time. It was probably at some TV.
Right.
Vince Senior would be there and he had a couple partners and I'd introduce myself and, thank them for letting me in the WWF and blah, blah, blah. And Vince Senior was a very classy man. He was if you watch an old movie, in the 30s and 40s, a typical promoter. I mean, he had the, gray hair going back, looked very classy. Always had a long, kind of like, I don't know what the hell, it was a brown coat. I forget the official name of it. But always looked really classy. And Vince Senior, he had a habit. You could hear him coming. He'd have 4 or 5 quarters in his hand. And he'd be like, fidgeting with them and jingling. So you'd hear the jingling coming and you'd say, "Oh, here comes the old man."
All right. Okay. And
but it was a different era. I mean, no contract. So, the wrestlers would try their best to get the most money they can, and the promoters would try their best to, pay the talent, but make as much money as they could, too, because back then they had to pay for their television show to be on TV. Now, it's the other way.
Right. Yeah. How that flipped in just a matter of, 30, 40 years, and just the amazing rights fees that they're getting now.
Less than that, really. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just insane, absorbing it. Now is Vince Jr. around at this time? And what's your first interactions with him like?
Oh yeah. Vince was there. He was probably a couple of years before me. And, interesting guy. He was very athletic, and he did, the one-man announcing team thing back in those days, and then did all the interviews. And Vince wasn't a small guy, maybe at least 6 foot or so. So he would take his shoes off when he did the interviews, so the guys would look bigger than him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, little tricks like that. But he was basically, when I was there and his dad was running it, it was kind of like Vince was quiet because it was his dad and partner thing, but he was a sponge for sucking up all the knowledge he could. And you could see that come to life when the eras changed in the 1981, 82 with nationwide cables. And Vince was the first promoter that saw the death of the territories and, everything changing.
Yeah.
So he's smart, very sharp guy, very smart. And he's still everywhere. I mean, I wish I had half his energy.
Yeah, I was just watching his, he just did a public interview for the first time in a while last week with Pat McAfee, and it was pretty interesting, still hella sharp, and, really, it was an interesting watch for sure.
I tell you, he's an amazing guy, and from what I hear, and I could be wrong, but I don't think so, with WrestleMania 1, when he took that big, shot, he had, his house mortgage, the business mortgage, wherever he owned mortgage, this is before the billionaire days.
Right.
And he took a shot. If WrestleMania bombed, there might not be a WWE, years ago. He kind of bet everything on the house, but, WrestleMania wound up bigger than the Super Bowl. So, I mean, yeah, amazing guy. I can't say enough about how, amazing Vince is.
Well, that's awesome. And that's good to hear, especially with the, just your experiences during that weekend, coming in there for the Hall of Fame. Now, was that the, if flash back forward to that, era, that's kind of the first time you had, besides the Bruno stuff, kind of had like dipped your feet, back into that water. And I'll try to cover a little bit of that stuff a little bit later on, but yeah, just great, how Vince came up to you afterwards and just everything. And if we're going back here to around the time that you're breaking in, of course, we're in the triple WF at this point. I'm going through some of your match history though, and it says that you went to Japan in 78. Do you have any memories of going to Japan in 78?
Well, I've been to Japan, a handful of times, different tours. If 78 was the first time, that probably makes sense. And I remember the very first time I went to Japan, and it was an interesting country. I smartened up to the pachinko machines real quick. So whenever I wasn't wrestling or traveling, I was in the pachinko parlor because it was like a secret way of gambling. You could trade your balls in for a lighter or a watch, or you could go into the alley and trade your balls in for money. And I loved playing pachinko. But it was interesting because my very first time in Japan was also Stan Hansen's very first time in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, interesting, because Stan made a really kind of a long-term career in Japan. He was there a lot.
A staple, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was both of your guys' first trips there, and you go do so. Now, is this like an indie thing, or are you still under the WWF banner at the time?
Well, not really, because back then, again, there was no contracts, no nothing, just word of mouth. So I was there for a while, and then Bruno said, hey, why don't you go to Japan for 6 weeks? And they paid great, and you got more experience, and you took a break. Because if you stay in one place too long, people might like you, but then after a while they go, oh, this guy's great. Isn't there anybody else, though? How many times can you watch the same guys wrestle each other? And that's why when I came back, Bruno was retiring, and I was known not so much as Larry Zbysko, but, this is Bruno's protege guy, yeah. So that's why I had to make a move to try to get myself a name. And when Bruno started doing the broadcasting and all that, I knew whoever could ever get Bruno back in the ring one more time would be the next big thing. And all the publicity came out of New York in those days with the magazines and all that. And thank God it worked. I became the most hated guy for a couple of years, at least. They tried to kill me. I got stabbed, shot at. Oh, God, it goes on.
I mean, the emotion of the fans back then is just, and that just kind of comes once again with just over time. And, like we mentioned before, what Vince did and what people are doing now. So, at least it's, maybe a little bit safer for a bad guy in present day. But you still have people, you still have weird things like that. You got the guy that tackled Bret Hart at the Hall of Fame a few years ago. I don't know if you caught that, weird stuff happening like that.
Did some guy tackled Bret Hart?
Yeah. No, they did. It was a few years ago, and they were inducting, Bret was up there inducting someone. I don't know. It wasn't Bret's induction, but he was part. I want to say they were maybe inducting the Hart Foundation as a team. I'm not sure, but he was up there doing a speech, and of course, you get the random guy from the audience. He came out and tried to tackle Brett. This is when they had it in the ring, yeah, and they just the Revival guys, they just lit the dude up.
Oh God! I mean, in the old days, guys would come in the ring, and you had to beat the shit out of them. They try to stab you or hurt you.
Yeah, no, it's a scary thing, Yeah, and it's like they say, you're taking your life into your own hands once you hop that guardrail, right?
Well, you know what? It was such a different, time and day. Brandon, when Bruno was in the ring with like 300-pound Tanaka or 300-pound George Steele or 300-pound Ivan Koloff or 300-pound Killer Kowalski, and he started bleeding and fell down to the mat, people in the audience had heart attacks.
Right.
Some died. You could see, the EMTs pushing stretchers up different aisles to the top of the Garden or the Spectrum. That's how much they believed and were emotionally involved. People died. Wow. And nowadays, these guys can dive off the top of a cage, do 3 flips, land through 4 tables, and people just go, "Hey, holy shit.
Right, still not a freak out.
Yeah, it's not a freak out kind of thing. It's like, oh, this is awesome. And then if you dive at somebody and they miss you, this is my favorite, the whole crowd, even kids. You effed up. You effed up. All chatting. Oh, you got to be kidding. Oh, my God.
So we've mentioned kind of briefly, you talk about getting Bruno out of retirement and everything. This all leads up to, showdown at Shea, of course, right? So,
yeah, take
us through that. Just the hugeness of that. I don't think, a lot of the newer fans really understand how pre-huge, like WrestleMania type status that show actually was.
Yeah, that was, before that, nationwide cable and all that. TV was on, I think, at 1 a.m. on some channel. And it was funny because back then, like on the news, they never talk about wrestling because they didn't consider it a sport,
Right.
But me and Bruno sold out Shea, and all over the news was, hey, Shea Stadium sold out tonight and turned away thousands of people. And no, it wasn't the Mets. We'll be right back with the story after this. So it became local news, but for those days, it was unheard of. It was
Absolutely.
Unheard of. So it was, and then unfortunately, it kind of, the next year or so really went downhill because Bruno, stopped wrestling and Bob Backlund wound up with the belt. And Bob's a great guy and a great athlete, but in terms of the fans, compared to Bruno and all his opponents, and the guy, Bob looked like Howdy Doody. He just couldn't fill Bruno's shoes, which is no insult because really no one could have filled Bruno's shoes right then.
Right, absolutely. And Bob did, what he could, I would imagine. But yeah, and you're also got to think this is kind of the transition time right here, right? At least transition or post-transition, from senior to junior, like right around in here, right?
Yeah, that was the time when, unfortunately, Vince Sr. passed. But it was at the exact time when nationwide cable was starting. And Vince saw it coming, so what Vince did was, no contract. So he took, Hulk Hogan, Mean Gene, Jesse the Body, Bobby Heenan, maybe someone else from the AWA territory, and then he took, Roddy Piper and Flair and Snuka and Ricky Steamboat and somebody from the NWA, the Crockett's, territory. So he had all the top guys that were in the territories. So when he went nationwide, he could go into all the towns across the country and people would know their stars because that's where he got them from. And then the other two promoters, the Gagnes and the Crockett's tried to work together to compete with them, but Vince got a big head start and the older promoters just didn't know how to do it. you know, and then finally it just wound up, you know, the end of the territory days.
Yeah, and now we have, you know, this now, which is like, you know, whatever you would call this. I mean, you have the conglomerate that is WWE. You have, you know, AEW trying to ascend, you know, to a national, you know, global level even at this point. They still have some work to do, you know, as far as like a global branding standpoint, of course, behind WWE. But now, you know, just a few other things I want to touch on here, because we've had some good stuff so far, and I just want to make sure we get some of this stuff in. I did want to bring up you, you know, leaving the North Territory in 81, you end up in Georgia. I want to ask you about the angle with you and Killer Tim Brooks, the purchase of the title. Who comes up with that whole deal? And, you know, I mean, this whole angle, I think, was way ahead of its time.
Well, yeah, it was the first time anybody bought the belt, which was totally insulting to the fans and the, you know. But it was interesting because what happened was, you know, by 1981-ish or so, when the politics were changing, I've already been in the WWE throughout the 70s, did the big thing with Bruno. And then I was wrestling matches with Pedro Morales and Ivan Putski, you know, and the shows after that. But if I would have stayed there any longer, I would have started becoming old news.
Right.
But because all the publicity came out, and Vince took the AWA talent and the NWA talent, you know, to get ready for the nationwide stuff, that left those two territories always in need of, you know, another star. And so I went to Japan and I came home. I think I took like, you know, 4 or 5 months off after all the brutality and stuff. But then I get calls because the AWA needed someone, you know, and I had all the publicity from, you know, the Bruno thing. And so as the WWE thing was getting off the ground, I always had a home. I was in the AWA a while, then back in the NWA to do something with, you know, Killer Brooks. So we screwed Paul Orndorff out of the belt, and then I bought it. Then I was back in the AWA doing something, and then I came back to the NWA to work a wrestling program with Dusty and Baby Doll and A Kiss of Death. That never happened. Then I went back to the AWA and, you know, with the belt thing. And so I always, you know, lucked out and had places that needed me because Vince was full of top guys, you know.
Mm-hmm. That just ended up kind of being how it went. And, you know, you mentioned the AWA, you know, you're mixing it up with guys like Slaughter, Bockwinkel. I mean, peak time, you know, I would say definitely for the business, some of that stuff. What are some of your memories of Bockwinkel in particular?
Well, you know what, Nick Bockwinkel, I mean, he was a smooth old pro. He was great. You know, I mean, Nick in the ring was a night off, you know, and the people going nuts. And then it got to the point where I wrestled Nick a lot. So when I had the belt, there was something, then they'd bring Sergeant Slaughter in to do a little program. And then I had Nikita Koloff, a little program, wrestled Harley Race once, you know, for a program. And so, you know, it kind of worked out good.
Do you have any good stories about Bobby you could share with us, possibly?
Bobby Heenan?
Yes.
Oh, God, you know what? I mean, kind of. Just Bobby was like a natural comic. And we used to argue over, like, you know, we're driving from this town to this town, and we'd say, oh, I'll take Bobby with me. And some other guy would say, well, no, Bobby can come with us. And they wouldn't even charge him trans because the boys in the car would all split the gas. But we wouldn't want to take Bobby just because we knew it was going to be a 2 or 3 hour, you know, comedy routine. Bobby was just a natural comic. Everything he had was, you know, I mean, he was great to travel with, natural, funny guy, and, you know, great manager. I mean, he could talk up a storm. God, he was in the Chicago arena and someone shot at him from the audience. Ring.
I had to ask you about that because, you guys, having the connection from those AWA days and then later on in the WCW days, I just figured there was some good stuff there, but that's priceless. You guys kind of a bidding war for the services of Heenan in your car. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we never really hung out together because, like I said, I golfed a lot when I wasn't doing the show and that. But during the day while they were getting all their meetings and matches and doing all that stuff, me and Bobby, we would just be outside in the back bullshitting and laughing, and because we never went to a meeting, no one told us what to say on the commentary. Everything was strictly ad lib. So it was an easy, thing. And then after my first half of the show, I disappeared. So I didn't hang around.
Right.
So I really didn't hang out with the guys.
All right. Well, no, that's fair enough. No, that's, I also want to mention real quick and just kind of bring this up, obviously, because it's just seems like a sin not to. Do want to mention Vern, of course, your promoter for a number of years, but also your father-in-law, right? So, I mean,
yeah.
how is that? How was that whole thing? I mean, were you able to go to him for advice other than wrestling? I mean, how's that relationship over the years?
It worked out good. Me and Kathy were both like 36. And maybe 35, because I was there once before, but then I went back, and I knew Kathy for some years, but then I went back, and she was still working in the office, and we started going out, but you didn't want anybody in the business to know you were dating each other. So we kept it a secret, because the last thing the promoter, you want is your daughter to marry a wrestler. But she was in the wrestling business and Ray, so we had something really cool in common, and all that.
Okay.
And it was funny because one time me and Kathy went to a Bob Seger concert in Minnesota. And after the concert, when the lights went on, who's sitting behind me and Kathy is Greg, her brother, and some people. So we got busted.
Oh, wow.
So the very next day, I get a message from Pat, the office secretary, that said, "Oh, Vern would like you to come in and have a talk." I went, "Oh, great." So I drive to the office the next day, and as I'm walking into Vern's office, I throw him completely off. I open the door, and he looks at me, and he starts going, and I went, "Dad!" And he went, but it worked out really good. Vern was a great father-in-law. Me and Kathy wound up getting married because she was 6 months pregnant. We went out to Vegas, and Vern was out there, and my dad threw a big party. And Kathy wore a red dress with her stomach sticking out, and maybe got married in the Purple Chapel of Love or whatever the hell it was out there.
Oh, wow.
She went to bed. Our honeymoon, she went to bed, and I went down to get to the casino.
Hey, well, you can't be expecting, it's a big night, if she's tired and pregnant, but hey, it's time to live it up.
I know it was a unique, typical wrestling experience, but it was good. We got a couple of good kids, everybody's healthy, so.
Awesome stuff. Had to ask you about that. It seems like we're just, going to gloss over some stuff, but I want to hit some key bullet points before we wrap up.
Okay.
WCW in the early 90s. You're there. You're a big part of the Dangerous Alliance. You got Steve there. You got Bobby Eaton. At that point in time, is Steve just kind of like a sponge soaking up knowledge for you guys? Or, I mean,
Well, Steve just showed up in the territory, I think from Texas. I really didn't know him well. I think he had Lady Blossom with him or some woman.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the deal with that. I mean, me and On were the enforcers.
Right.
And I was like, 41 years old or so at the time and had a few knee surgeries and I didn't want to get hurt. But what happened was the business was changing at TBS because the TBS business people didn't know anything about wrestling. And they hired the wrong guy. They hired Bill Watts. Bill Watts was an a-hole. Right. And he was the kind of a-hole who knew he was an a-hole and was proud of being an a-hole. And when Bill Watts showed up, me and Arn were really over as if forces. The tag team got over great. But Bill Watts' idea was everybody over 40 should just get beat, get the hell out, and let's make Eric Watts a star. So when I was in the group, I didn't like the groups because then you're only as good as the group, and I wanted my living legend legacy to live on, So what I did was I told the people at TBS, and I didn't want to work with Watts in the group. So I said, oh, my knee hurts. So I got another little orthoscope, cartilage, scope operation, and was home for a couple months recouping and pulled myself out of the group. And then I got a call from, I think, maybe Craig Leather, some executive producer that said, hey, Larry, would you mind coming down and helping us out? Jesse the Body just quit, and we need someone to commentate over some of these, shows we have put together that needs a voiceover for the syndicated. So I said, yeah, I'll drive down and do it. And I never did it before. So I drove down and voiced over a few shows they had made. And the door flies open, and this guy comes in and goes, damn, you're the greatest color man we've ever heard. Would you want to be our color man? We'll give you this much a year. And this was now the time when Turner was giving away big contracts. I almost fell off the chair. Right. It was a hell of a lot. It was a hell of a lot more than I was making wrestling.
Unbelievable.
So that's, plus at 41, 42, whatever it was, I was getting to the point where, hey, if I can make this much money sitting in a chair talking, and I was always great at interviews and psychology and the gift of gab, so I included the psychology and in that. And I had to soften my character up because I couldn't talk about me. I had to talk about how great everybody in the ring was. So then over time, I kind of grew into the more loved guy and the legendary guy. And doing the broadcasting saved my body. Plus, it gave me a couple more generations of fans to reach while other guys my age were disappearing or dying,
Right.
But so it really was, I didn't plan it. It was unplanned. But what a blessing that turned out to be.
Absolutely. And that carries you through. I mean, of course you did a little bit of stuff there, while you were still doing it, right? Like the stuff with Regal and that whole thing. Those are my first memories of you personally. I was probably about 8 years old during that feud. Right. And
I saw Regal show up, and Regal was great. Yeah. And he was from England. He knew how to wrestle, but he had that look. People hated him. But there was nobody that could work with him and give him a good match because you had the Nasty Boys, the Public Enemy, Lex Luger.
Right, all the brawling style guys, yeah.
Well, they're just clotheslining each other, and, So I came out and did a special thing with Regal to prove to the guys what a wrestling match could be like.
Right.
And it was funny because me and Regal had a match for 27 minutes on TBS, the first one. And when I went back to the dressing room, blowed up dying, because I didn't wrestle for 4 years with him, Brian Pillman was running around the backstage screaming, these guys wrestled 27 minutes and didn't throw one clothesline.
Pillman. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, no, it was amazing. I mean, even as a child, like I said, watching that, I could tell even then that, man, this is something really different. And I think it just elevated that title too, to where I was like, man, it seems more important than the world title right now. Just the way these guys are going with each other. And it was just.
Well, the way we did it, and because Regal could, get heat.
Yeah.
He was great.
Cool. Well, Larry, gosh, I'm running out of time with you, pal.
Any more bullet points?
I could sit here. And throw out some stuff all day. I do want to mention real quick, promo style. You got a very, very unique promo style. How did you develop that? I mean, who were your influences as far as promos?
Well, you know what? It was kind of, I stole a little bit from everybody in the old school. The guys that were over, Bruno, Strongbow, and how they did interviews. But the secret was to be your character. I mean, the way I walked to the ring, the way I talked on the interviews, the way I, said stuff. And the secret was that no matter what people thought about wrestling, they believed that Larry Zbysko in real life was a complete asshole. So I had them hating me, whether I was wrestling or not wrestling, but they go, well, this guy's an asshole. I hate him. So I learned the psychology of how to, do that. And I did it. When I got done talking for 2 minutes or so, which is plenty. Now they talk 10, 15 minutes, you want to slit your wrist. Right. But, but people believed I was an asshole. I just walked out and people chant Larry sucked for 10 minutes. I didn't do nothing.
Well, just knowing how to go, I suppose, and like you said, just taking that little bits of everyone and meshing it in.
Psychology, yeah. If you're a bad guy, you're an a-hole. If you're a good guy, you're a nice guy. That's simple.
It's pretty simple in that way, yeah, I suppose. There's a lot of other stuff, of course, we could talk about all day, Mr. Zbysko, but it's been a true pleasure. New project, Legends of Wrestling, coming soon, right?
Yeah, but I think they've got some shows put together, and the email I got, I think I'm thinking end of March, beginning of April, it involves me flying to Memphis for like 2 days every 2 months just to do some ins and outs. So it should be starting up maybe the next couple months or so. Could be on Tubi, Peacock, or God knows where, some streaming thing. And then I was in a movie. We did a movie, finished at end of 2019, and it's almost done. They've been editing it and putting in special effects, but it should be done and out any time. It's about a group of wrestlers who save a town from aliens.
Oh, wow.
It's all called right now. You can Google it. You can Google The Replaceables, the movie. The
Replaceables.
And okay. Yeah, right now the title is The Replaceables.
All right.
But when the movie's completely done, which should be any time, I talked to the guy yesterday. If it goes to some distributor, and again, who knows if they'll be in theaters or Netflix or who knows. But the title might change depending on the distributor, But, yeah, right now you can Google Replaceables, the movie, and should find some stuff.
Awesome. Cool stuff. Be on the lookout for the Replaceables, the movie. Legends of Wrestling coming to a streaming service soon. And for God's sakes, if you haven't, go back, watch some Larry Zbysko matches on Peacock, on YouTube, wherever you can find them. Watch this guy work, watch this guy promo, of course, just, living legend himself. Like I said, it's been an absolute honor to have you with me today, Mr. Zbysko. I appreciate you coming by.
Well, thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. God, an hour went by quick, didn't it?